A long, long time ago, there lived a child named Epimetheus, who had no parents, no father or mother at all. One day, another child who was also parentless was sent from a distant land to be his companion, so he wouldn't feel lonely. Her name was Pandora. The first thing Pandora noticed when she entered Epimetheus's home was a large box. And almost right away, she asked, "Epimetheus, what's in that box?" Epimetheus replied, "Dear Pandora, that's a secret. Please don't ask questions about it. The box was left here to be kept safe, and I don't even know what's inside." Still curious, Pandora asked, "But who gave it to you? Where did it come from?" "That's a secret too," Epimetheus said. Pandora frowned and said with frustration, "How annoying. I wish that big ugly box wasn't here at all." "Oh, come on," said Epimetheus, trying to cheer her up. "Forget about the box. Let's go outside and play with the other children." That was thousands of years ago, and the world back then was completely different from today. In those days, everyone was a child. There were no parents, because children didn't need them. There was no danger, no problems, and no chores to do. Clothes never needed mending, and there was always plenty of food and drink. Whenever a child was hungry, food would grow right on the trees. If they looked in the morning, they could see blossoms turning into supper. By evening, there would be buds growing that would become tomorrow's breakfast. Life was easy and joyful, no work, no school, just games, dances, happy voices, singing like birds, and laughter all day long. Most amazing of all, children never fought, never cried, and no one ever sulked in a corner. What a wonderful time to be alive. You see, those nasty little creatures called troubles, the ones that now buzz around like mosquitoes, didn't exist yet. The biggest worry a child ever had was Pandora's growing curiosity about the mysterious box. At first, this curiosity was only a small feeling, barely a shadow of a real trouble. But over time, it grew stronger and more real. Before long, the once bright and happy cottage of Epimetheus and Pandora didn't seem quite as cheerful as the others. Where could the box have come from? Pandora kept asking herself and Epimetheus. And what could possibly be inside it? "You're always talking about that box," Epimetheus finally said, clearly annoyed. "Please, Pandora, can't you talk about something else? Come on, let's go pick some ripe figs and eat them under the trees for supper. I know a vine with the sweetest grapes you've ever tasted. And you're always talking about grapes and figs." Pandora snapped back. "All right then," said Epimetheus, who was usually very patient and kind, like most kids back then. "Let's go play with our friends." "I'm tired of playing," Pandora replied. "I don't even enjoy it anymore. All I can think about is that awful box. I have to know what's inside. Like I've told you 50 times, I don't know what's in it," Epimetheus said, now getting a little frustrated. "So how could I possibly tell you?" "You could open it," Pandora suggested quietly, glancing sideways at him, "and then we'd know for sure." "Pandora, are you serious?" exclaimed Epimetheus, horrified at the thought. His expression showed so much fear and shock at the idea of opening the box, which had been left in his care with strict instructions not to open it, that Pandora decided not to push the idea anymore. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about it. "At least tell me how it got here," she said. "It was left at the door," Epimetheus answered. "Just before you arrived. The person who left it looked very cheerful, like he was trying not to laugh. He wore a strange cloak and a cap that seemed to have feathers, almost like it had wings." "Did he have a staff?" asked Pandora. "Yes. The most unusual staff you've ever seen," said Epimetheus. "It looked like two snakes twisting around a stick. It was so lifelike, I thought the snakes were real." "I know who it was," Pandora said thoughtfully. "No one else has a staff like that. It was Quicksilver. He brought me here too, along with the box. I bet it's meant for me, and maybe it's full of pretty clothes, or toys for us to play with, or something delicious to eat." "Maybe," said Epimetheus, turning away. "But until Quicksilver comes back and tells us, we have no right to open it." "What a boring boy he is," Pandora muttered as Epimetheus left the cottage. "I wish he were more adventurous." For the first time since she arrived, Epimetheus left without inviting Pandora to come along. He went off to pick grapes and figs on his own, or to play with other children. He was completely fed up with Pandora's endless talk about the box. He truly wished Quicksilver had left the box at someone else's door, someone where Pandora would never have seen it. She just wouldn't stop talking about it. The box, always the box. It was as if the thing was cursed, and the cottage wasn't big enough to hold it without one of them always bumping into it and bruising their legs. To be fair, Epimetheus wasn't used to being annoyed. In those happy times, children rarely had anything to be upset about, so they didn't know how to deal with even small frustrations. And a small irritation back then felt like a much bigger deal than it would today. After Epimetheus left, Pandora stared at the box. She had called it ugly more times than she could count, but the truth was, it was actually very beautiful. It would have looked lovely in any room. The box was made of fine wood, with dark, rich patterns running through it. The surface was so shiny and polished that Pandora could see her own reflection in it. Since she had no mirror, you'd think she would have appreciated the box just for that reason alone. The edges and corners of the ornate chest had been sculpted with astonishing artistry. Encircling its perimeter were intricate figures of elegant men and women, as well as the most charming children ever imagined, reclining or frolicking amidst an abundance of intricately carved flowers and luxuriant foliage. These varied elements were rendered with such exceptional detail and fused together with such harmony that blossoms, leaves, and human forms seemed to unite into a single garland of interwoven beauty. Yet, intermittently, Pandora thought she glimpsed, peering subtly from behind the floral ornamentation, a visage that was not so delightful, something subtly unpleasant that diminished the beauty of the entire ensemble. However, upon closer inspection and touching the location with her fingertip, she could perceive nothing amiss. Some face, genuinely lovely, had merely appeared distorted due to her catching a fleeting, angled view of it. The most exquisite visage of all had been sculpted in what artists refer to as high relief, positioned prominently at the center of the lid. There was nothing else present upon the surface, only the dark, lustrous sheen of the polished wood and this singular face at its center, encircled by a crown of flowers. Pandora had gazed upon this face numerous times and imagined that its mouth possessed the capacity to smile or appear solemn, much like a living countenance. The facial features conveyed a vivid, almost mischievous expression, as if the lips might suddenly burst into speech. Had the mouth been able to speak, it might have said something such as, "Do not be apprehensive, Pandora. What possible harm could result from opening the box? Pay no attention to that simple-minded Epimetheus. You are far more insightful than he is and possess significantly more spirit. Open the box, and you shall see something marvelously delightful." I nearly neglected to mention that the chest was secured, not by any conventional lock, but by an extraordinarily complex knot fashioned from a golden cord. The knot appeared to have neither beginning nor end. Never had a knot been twisted in such a cunning and elaborate fashion, with such an entanglement of loops and turns, seemingly designed to defy even the most dexterous fingers. And yet, precisely due to its intricacy, Pandora felt increasingly compelled to examine it, if only to understand how it had been tied. On 2 or 3 occasions, she had already bent over the box and held the knot between her thumb and forefinger, though she had refrained from actively attempting to untie it. "I do believe," she mused, "that I am beginning to understand how it was tied. Perhaps I could reassemble it after unfastening it. Surely, there could be no harm in that. Even Epimetheus could not reproach me for such an act. I am not opening the box, and of course would never do so without that silly boy's permission, even if the knot were undone." It might have been far better for Pandora had she possessed some small task or responsibility to occupy her mind, something to divert her attention from her ever-growing curiosity. However, children in those idyllic days led lives of such leisure, unmarred by sorrow or struggle, that they truly had too much free time. They could not perpetually engage in games of hide-and-seek among the flowering shrubs, or play blind-man's buff with garlands over their eyes, or invent other amusements as Earth herself was still in her infancy. When existence is comprised entirely of recreation, then labor becomes a welcome novelty. There was, quite literally, nothing meaningful to do. A bit of sweeping and dusting around the cottage, perhaps, and the gathering of freshly bloomed flowers, though they grew in such profusion that even that was hardly a chore, and arranging them in vases constituted the entirety of little Pandora's daily responsibilities. The remainder of the day, inevitably, was consumed by the box. In fact, it might be argued that the chest was a peculiar sort of blessing for her. It stimulated an endless stream of thoughts and speculations and gave her something intriguing to discuss whenever she had someone to converse with. When she was in a cheerful mood, she would admire the luminous sheen of its polished surfaces and the luxuriant border of exquisite faces and foliage that adorned it. If she found herself irritated or ill-tempered, she would deliver a sharp shove or even kick it with her small, impatient foot. And many a kick did that mysterious box receive, for it was a mischievous box, as we shall eventually discover, and richly deserved all the abuse it got. Undoubtedly, had it not been for the box, our clever and spirited little Pandora would have had far less stimulation for her active mind. The question of what resided inside it became a subject of endless contemplation. What, indeed, could be contained within? Imagine, dear young listeners, how fervently your imagination would be engaged if there were a grand box in your home, one that might possibly contain a delightful surprise intended as a gift for Christmas or New Year's. Do you honestly believe that you would experience less curiosity than Pandora? If you were left alone in the room with the box, would you not feel the overwhelming temptation to gently lift its lid? Of course, you would not actually open it. No, certainly not. But if you suspected it might contain toys, how excruciatingly difficult it would be to forego just one tiny peek. It's uncertain whether Pandora expected to find toys inside, since such items had not yet been invented in those early days when the whole world was, in essence, a colossal plaything for its carefree inhabitants. Nevertheless, she was absolutely convinced that something extraordinarily beautiful and precious was hidden within, and thus she felt just as eager to glimpse it as any of the little girls seated here before me might feel, and perhaps even more so. On this particular day, the one we've been speaking of for so long, Pandora's curiosity grew exponentially more intense than usual. At last, she approached the box with a determination that was more than halfway toward opening it, if she were able. Oh, naughty Pandora! Her initial attempt was to lift it. The box was exceedingly heavy, far too weighty for the delicate strength of a young child like Pandora. She managed to raise one end a few inches off the ground and then allowed it to drop back down with a noticeable thump. A moment later, she fancied she heard a faint stirring noise emanating from within the box. She pressed her ear close to it and listened intently. Indeed, there did seem to be a kind of muffled murmur inside, or perhaps it was only the ringing in her ears. Or maybe the accelerated beating of her own heart. Pandora could not decide for certain whether she had truly heard anything. Nevertheless, her curiosity burned more fiercely than ever. As she drew her head back, her gaze fell once again upon the intricate golden knot. Whoever tied this must have been remarkably clever, she reflected. But I do believe I can unravel it. I am determined, at the very least, to find where the ends begin. So she took the golden cord in her hands. Almost without meaning to, and scarcely aware of her actions, she became wholly absorbed in the attempt to untie it. Meanwhile, brilliant rays of sunshine streamed through the open window, mingling with the joyful laughter of children playing at a distance, perhaps Epimetheus's voice among them. Pandora paused for a moment. What a glorious day it was! Wouldn't it be far wiser to forget about the perplexing knot, abandon all thoughts of the box, and run off to join her playmates in carefree merriment? And yet, throughout all this, her nimble fingers continued to work, almost automatically, at the knot. When she happened to glance at the carved face on the box's lid, it seemed to smile at her with sly amusement. That face looks rather mischievous, Pandora thought. I wonder whether it is smirking because I am doing something wrong. I feel strongly inclined to run away right now. But just then, quite by accident, she gave the knot a peculiar twist that caused a truly astonishing thing to occur. The golden cord unraveled itself, as if by enchantment, and left the box unsealed. This is the most peculiar thing I have ever experienced, exclaimed Pandora. What will Epimetheus think? And how on earth will I ever tie it back together? Ah, chimed the gentle voice from the box, he secretly wishes to see me too. Come now, my dear Pandora. I promise you, I am nothing like those other dreadful creatures with stingers in their tails. If you would only let me out, you would understand immediately. Come, come, let me breathe the fresh air and comfort you. The alluring tone was almost irresistible. With each passing word, Pandora felt her sorrow gradually ease. Even Epimetheus, although still sulking, turned partially around, his spirits lifting ever so slightly. My dear Epimetheus, cried Pandora, did you hear that voice? Yes, of course I did, he responded, though not particularly warmly. And what of it? Shall I open the lid once more? Pandora asked. Do as you like, replied Epimetheus. You've already brought about a world of harm. What's one more trouble among so many? You could be a bit more gracious, murmured Pandora, wiping away a tear. Ah, the naughty boy, laughed the voice within the box. He knows full well he longs to see me. Open the lid, my sweet Pandora, I am in such a hurry to bring you comfort. Let me out, and you'll see that not everything is lost. Epimetheus, declared Pandora, whatever may come, I have decided, I shall open the box again. And since the lid is so heavy, said Epimetheus, leaping to her side, I'll assist you. With unified purpose, the children raised the lid once more. From within emerged a radiant, winged being, glowing with cheer and warmth. She flitted about the room, spreading light and joy wherever she went, just as a mirror catches and dances sunlight into darkened corners. The luminous figure alighted on Epimetheus's wound, touching it gently, and the pain instantly disappeared. Then she kissed Pandora's forehead, and her suffering too was immediately relieved. Having performed these benevolent deeds, the glowing stranger hovered above the children, beaming with such sweetness that they both began to feel that perhaps it was not such a terrible thing to have opened the box. Otherwise, they never would have met their radiant visitor. "Who are you, beautiful one?" Pandora asked. "I am called Hope," replied the sparkling figure. "And because I bring brightness and renewal, I was placed in the box to balance the troubles that were destined to escape. Fear not, we shall endure them together." "Your wings look like the rainbow," exclaimed Pandora. "They are like the rainbow," said Hope, "for although I bring joy, I am woven of both tears and smiles." "Will you remain with us forever?" asked Epimetheus. "So long as you live," Hope promised with a gentle smile. "Sometimes, you may believe I have disappeared entirely, but I shall return again and again, often when you least expect me. You will see my shimmer on the ceiling and know I am near. I also know," she added, "that something beautiful and eternal awaits you beyond this world." "Oh, tell us," the children cried. "Not now," whispered Hope, pressing her finger to her lips. "But trust in me. It is real." "We do trust you," said Pandora and Epimetheus in unison. And so they did, and so has all humanity since then. And, though it may have been a most imprudent thing for Pandora to open the box, I cannot help but feel a measure of gratitude. For while the world is now overrun with stinging troubles, what would we do without hope? She ennobles our sufferings, transforms despair into purpose, and reveals that even our brightest moments are but shadows of a more magnificent joy to come. She made several attempts to retie the knot, but quickly discovered that it was entirely beyond her capability. The cord had come undone so abruptly that she had no recollection of how the loops had been arranged. Even trying to recall the shape of the knot proved futile. There was nothing she could do but leave the box as it was, awaiting Epimetheus's return. But, thought Pandora, once he sees the box unfastened, he will know that I was the one who tampered with it. How will I ever convince him that I haven't looked inside? Then a mischievous notion crept into her heart. If she was going to be suspected of having opened the box anyway, why not simply do it now and see what was within? Oh, very naughty and exceedingly foolish Pandora. You ought to have thought only of doing what was right and refraining from what was wrong, not of how to avoid blame from your playmate. And perhaps she would have thought better, had the enchanted face on the lid not appeared so temptingly persuasive, and had she not imagined she could hear the indistinct whispering of tiny voices within. Whether it was reality or mere illusion, she could not tell, but a soft chorus of murmurs seemed to reach her ears, or perhaps it was simply her own curiosity whispering. "Let us out, dearest Pandora, let us out. We will be such delightful companions for you. Just open the lid and let us out." What could it be? Pandora pondered. Is something living concealed in the box? Well, yes, I have made up my mind to take just one peek. Only one quick look, and then I will close the lid tightly again. Surely there can be no danger in one little peek. But now it is necessary for us to turn our attention to what Epimetheus was doing. Pandora, startled, let the lid of the container descend, and immediately stood up, glancing apprehensively around to discern what calamity had befallen Epimetheus. The thundercloud had rendered the room so dim and shadowy that she could not easily perceive her surroundings. However, she was soon aware of a most disagreeable humming noise, as though an enormous number of grotesque insects, colossal flies, monstrous mosquitoes, or perhaps those unpleasant bugs known as door beetles and pinching dogs, were swarming madly through the air. As her eyes gradually adjusted to the obscurity, she observed a multitude of hideous, malformed figures. These diminutive beings possessed bat-like wings, malevolent facial expressions, and viciously elongated stingers protruding from their tails. One of these creatures had inflicted a painful sting upon Epimetheus. It did not take long before Pandora herself began to scream, equally out of physical pain and overwhelming terror, and made a great tumult. A revolting little fiend had landed upon her forehead and was on the verge of delivering a sting of unknown severity when Epimetheus came to her aid and swiftly brushed it away. Now, if you are curious to learn the true identity of these grotesque entities that escaped from the container, I must reveal that they constituted the entire lineage of earthly afflictions. They included malevolent passions, countless varieties of anxieties, more than 150 distinct sorrows, and innumerable manifestations of diseases, each more miserable and agonizing than the next. Furthermore, there were myriad forms of moral depravity, too numerous and deplorable to enumerate here. In essence, every affliction that has ever tormented the physical or emotional well-being of humankind had been sealed within that mysterious vessel, entrusted to Epimetheus and Pandora for safekeeping, so that the joyous children of the world might forever remain untouched by them. had the two guardians fulfilled their responsibility, all would have remained in a state of paradisiacal bliss. No adult would have ever shed a tear of sorrow, and no child would have known anguish, from that ancient time to the present day. But here lies the moral, and a profound one indeed. Even a single imprudent action by one individual can have catastrophic repercussions for all of humanity. Through Pandora's impulsive decision to lift the lid of the ill-fated container, and through Epimetheus's failure to restrain her, these malevolent afflictions gained unrestricted access to the world. It quickly became apparent that it was impossible for the two children to confine the swarm within the limited confines of their own cottage. On the contrary, the very first thing they did was to open every door and window in a desperate attempt to expel the tormentors. And so, the winged troubles dispersed far and wide, causing distress and dismay to the other children of the world, such that none could muster a smile for many days thereafter. Most curiously, all the once immortal flowers and dewy blossoms, until now untouched by decay, began to wilt, fade, and shed their petals within a matter of days. The once perpetually youthful children, who had never aged, now began to grow older with each passing day. Eventually, they matured into young adults, then into full-grown men and women, and, finally, into the elderly, all without anticipating such a transformation. Meanwhile, the culpable Pandora and her nearly equally culpable companion, Epimetheus, remained within their cottage. Both had been badly stung and were enduring intense pain, a sensation wholly unfamiliar to them and, therefore, all the more unbearable. It was, after all, the very first instance in the history of the world that anyone had felt physical suffering. Additionally, both were steeped in mutual resentment and self-reproach. Epimetheus seated himself sullenly in a corner, deliberately turning his back to Pandora, while she collapsed in despair upon the floor, resting her head atop the accursed container, weeping as though her heart were irreparably broken. Suddenly, there came a delicate tapping from within the box. "What could that be?" Pandora asked, lifting her head. Epimetheus, whether he had not perceived the sound or simply remained too indignant to acknowledge it, offered no reply. "You are exceedingly unkind," Pandora sobbed again, "not even to speak to me." The tapping resumed. It resembled the dainty knock of a fairy's knuckle against the inside of the box, light and whimsical. "Who are you?" Pandora inquired, her curiosity once more piqued. "Who are you that lingers inside this nefarious container?" A soft and melodious voice answered from within. "Simply lift the lid, and you shall see." "No, absolutely not," Pandora replied through renewed sobs. "I've already suffered enough from opening this dreadful thing. You're inside the box, no doubt another wicked creature, and you shall remain there. The world already has too many of your cruel companions flying about." She glanced toward Epimetheus, perhaps hoping he would commend her for this display of wisdom. But the brooding boy merely muttered that her newfound prudence had come far too late.